with our new museum directory and this Vamonde pilot. That said, just a couple of Zoom etiquette things for those of us who are new. Questions, comments, and concerns are great, but please mute yourself if you're not talking, just so we don't get, in my case, it'd be like a barking dog or a crying baby. Both happen all the time. And then make liberal use, please, of the chat function, and you can raise your hand too in Zoom. You just have to turn on the chat and turn on participants so that you can see both. And yep, Jennifer will be hanging out in the chat, making sure that your questions are addressed as they come up. It's fine to not keep your camera on if you don't want to, no big deal. And if you just want to listen in and ask questions to unmute yourself, that's all great. With all that being said, I'm going to pass the time over to Kartik, who is here with us from Vamonde and is going to tell us a little bit about what they do and a little bit about how we might be able to work together as Utah Museums and getting some projects and museums into this digital platform. So before I spoil the ending, Kartik, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to share with you. The title, as you can see from my presentation, says creative ways to engage your audience during COVID-19, but really this will be a discussion about how museums around the country have used Vamonde through all sorts of strategic ways to help them with their digital content needs, but also help them engage or educate their audiences. So I'll talk a little bit more about ways that we work with museums, especially during this time when their museums are closed, to help them with digital content that they might need for their audiences. I'll also talk a little bit about types of digital tours that we work on with several of our museum partners and how you can take advantage of the tools that we have to build content during this time specifically as well. So I'm gonna kick this off with some introductions. So if you could, please share your name and organization name in the chat. Please also share any technical issues in the chat. So if you can't hear me or see the slides, please share that information, and Jennifer and Emily will be on deck to help you out navigate those issues as well. But please introduce yourself. I am based in Chicago, so I'm not familiar with who you are, who you represent, so it'd be great for me to get that introduction out of the way. A couple of logistics. I know Emily went over a couple of Zoom etiquette rules, but we'll have specific sections for Q&A, mostly at the end. But so enter your questions in the chat or save them until the end so you can ask me questions as we come along the way. The reason for that is I might be able to answer one of your questions while I'm going through my presentation, so I want to be mindful of questions that are asked prematurely when I'll be covering them later on. We're recording this presentation right now so we can send it out to your colleagues, other people who may be interested, so look out for that after my presentation today. And then, like I said before, use the chat for any technical issues that you may have. About me. So I am the Director of Customer Success at Vamonde, and in my role, I consult with museums around the country in helping form their digital strategy. So understanding what types of digital content will serve them and serve their museum goals is something that I work with plenty of different size museums, all different subject matter of museums on, but mostly that's my role, my focus around the country. And I'm the one that's going to be the direct partner with Emily and Jennifer in building the Vamonde pilot for Utah museums. My background in this is my master's in information strategy from Northwestern, and in that role I spent a lot of time on digital education and helping communicate digital material in the best way possible. The reason I'm so excited about talking to you today is that I'm really passionate about the intersection of storytelling and technology, specifically how technology such as mobile tech can really amplify your storytelling efforts and your museum efforts to share the knowledge that you've collected and educate as many people as possible. Last piece of kind of overall information and knowledge, I want to share a little bit about Vamonde. So Vamonde was founded in 2015, and we're based in Chicago, where I'm speaking from today. And Vamonde was founded by a professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and he was really interested in placemaking and doing research around that. So what connects people with the places around them, especially if they're traveling to a new place or destination? And his research led to two very important findings. One was that storytelling was the best way for people to connect with place. The second finding was that the growth of technology, especially mobile technology, was really changing the way that people were connecting with stories. No longer are people carrying around physical guidebooks or printed maps or things like that, but they're really Googling, going to apps, searching on TripAdvisor and things like that to find the information that they're looking for. These findings, we realized, led to a pretty big gap in technology between the storytellers of a certain area. And what I mean by that are museums, cultural institutions, tour guides, with the story seekers. So tourists or locals in a certain area, how can we connect the two using great digital content was kind of the question that our founder asked. And that kind of question spurred the development of Vamonde. So Vamonde is a digital experience platform that's available both on web and mobile. What we offer museums is a set of digital tools for them to create great digital experiences. So these can be virtual tours, exhibit tours that are online or on a mobile app, walking tours, digital field trips. We'll cover all the different types of content you can build on Vamonde, but those are just a few examples. But really, it's a chance for you to share your stories through a platform that's both on web and mobile and connect directly with the audiences that are seeking your stories. With Vamonde, you get tools to create the content. So you have access to our content creation software, which includes places to put pictures, videos, AR, VR, audio, all different multimedia. You also get engagement tools with our platform. So what I mean by that is direct access to social media and putting it on your website. And then lastly, and I think most importantly, you have access to the analytics so that you can track how your content is performing and how you can improve the performance of your content with your audience. All of our content has wayfinding and location and is location based. So there's a map associated with it, as you can see down at the bottom. And lastly, through our partnership with Utah Museums, this is a free tech benefit to anybody that's participating in the pilot or a member of the group that we have partnered with. So if you are working with Emily and Jennifer, this is available for free for you to use. Now I'm going to turn it over to you. Could I get a couple people to share a little bit about how you are responding at your respective institution to the current crisis that's happening? Either unmute yourself or share in the chat if you're interested in commenting. I'd like to hear from a couple volunteers.
You shouldn't be muted anymore.
Thanks, Emily. This is Amy Jorgensen.
Hey, Amy.
How are you, Kartik? Thanks for speaking to us today. So I work at a small nonprofit contemporary art space in rural central Utah, and we're having to respond in terms of like we're essentially reinventing ourselves to be a virtual space, because obviously nobody has access. So we're trying to translate exhibitions into video. We're trying to transition over to podcasts, things like that, and then working and brainstorming with artists to see what kinds of options we can come up with. Our biggest struggle is really education, though. How to translate education and a kind of little kids environment to a virtual experience that's really, interesting, compelling, and that people actually want to sit through.
Totally. Thank you for sharing. Could I get somebody else to share? You should be able to speak.
I'll share. This is Emily Bentley.
Yeah,
and I was going to say, I'll be really honest, we're not really doing a lot. we're a very small museum. Because of everything that's happened, essentially our budget is slashed for the remainder of the fiscal year. So we're just holding on to see what's going to happen. That's an honest answer, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and answer that I've heard a lot. You're not alone in that response. I think a lot of people have said, like, this is a time for us to think internally, to step back a little bit and just kind of reevaluate what we want to do. Because to be frank as well, like the normal that's going to come out of this is not going to be the same as how we got into this, right? So it's some museums are really taking the time to strategically think about how they want to position themselves, and just taking the time to kind of ride this out a little bit as well. And so, yeah, you're definitely not alone. Looks like Jessica created a site for resources, and I think that's a great option, especially since people who are stuck at home are really looking for relevant content to engage with while they're in shelter in place. Could I get a couple more people to share?
This is Teresa Orton, and I am the director for the Pioneer Museum in St. George for the Daughters of Utah Pioneers. And our impact has been fairly minimal, I guess, other than the fact that we are closed. All of our volunteer docents are elderly, and so we're very concerned about being able to get, when we would be able to get our docents back and opening up the museum. At this point, and I think the board would probably agree, we do not anticipate that our museum structure and management is going to be much different when we do open back up. We're long established museum, and so we have not really utilized a lot of technology. So what I am thinking is this is an opportunity for us to start to leverage technology and really build our museum experience and enhance the offerings that we have. And so we're trying to take this as a positive and enhance and try to get to, like you said, people who are searching for us on their phones and iPad through technology and social media. That's where we have not had a great presence. And so I'm hoping that this would be our chance to kind of step into that new technology and leverage. We're very interested in the things that you had mentioned, virtual tours and digital content and those types of things. Our impact has been, we have been closed, but we don't charge admission. Our financial situation is stable. We're supported by our members. We have obviously lost revenue from our gift shop sales, but that was not our main revenue source. So we are kind of okay in all of this. We're more nervous about when our docents will come back to go to work for us because of their age and situation.
Thanks for sharing, Teresa. That's definitely a valid concern that I've heard from other museums as well. I loved your point about being open and thinking of this as a positive. Like, that brings up the quote, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like, now that we've been pushed into this kind of crisis where your museum is closed, your physical space is closed, you're really starting to invest in technology because it's become necessary. It was kind of optional before, or it was something in the back burner, but now it's become something that's a priority. Any other last minute comments?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yeah, hi Bobby.
Hi. Hey, I'm from Chicago too.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, Highland Park. Anyway, I am involved with this pilot program through the museum I direct, the Silver Reef Museum, which is really small, unique, ghost town type museum. And so the idea of doing tours and visual tours and looking at our curation would be really exciting to me. But another thing that I'm involved in is this Arts to Zion program. We have a tourism-based website for Southern Utah, mostly Washington County. And we've been connecting the museums and the galleries on that with a map and really trying to do some of the things you mentioned, although it's really localized to Southern Utah, and it's been about 10 years in the making up to this point. And what I'm hoping is that we can utilize that to connect along with to you, because the state is using you. And if we can bring some content and some connections that have already been made to this platform, it would be really exciting. Diana's on the Arts Design Board. She's also part of the pilot program down here. And so, and Arts Design has worked a lot with the Pioneer Museum as well. We did a program for this when we had the Smithsonian down and connected all the museums. So I'm really hoping we can find a way to work with what we've already done and work with you and connect to the rest of Utah.
Yeah, great. I always tell museums this: if you have stuff that you already started, that's wonderful, because you're already a step ahead of museums that are coming to this fresh, because you already thought about it, have a strategy around what you want to build, how you want to build it. So we can continue that offline, but you might be inspired by some of the things that I talk about today to figure out how this really connects with your museum's individual work on Vamonde, but also this art design work that you're doing across the region or specifically in your county.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to move on. If you have any other comments, save them. There's going to be time to have another discussion later on. So if everybody could be on mute again, that would be awesome. So I wanted to give an industry-wide update of where museums are at and what we've heard being major pain points for museums around the country. So as of right now, and this might be changing as some states are reopening, but right now more than 75% of the museums around the country are currently closed to the public. This has severely impacted major operations, especially in the education programming and event space. So major events and field trips have been canceled. I spoke to one museum that said that they were going to lose like 40% of their attendees this year because they usually come from school groups or field trips. So these are major impacts that are happening on a small to mid-sized museum that affect, to the next point, revenue. So with the closure of the physical space, loss of ticket sales, gift shop sales, like somebody mentioned, museums are turning to online fundraising, crowdsourcing, and donation platforms to really keep them afloat during this crisis, or find ways to subsidize some of the programming and work that they want to do during this time as well. Lastly, and I think some of you touched on this point, really this shift in focus on digital. How can I create digital collections, digital tours, digital online exhibits? Those have all been topics that have come up in team discussions internally, but also externally as museum professionals and staff are seeking either education or actual tools to help them achieve those goals. All right, so in our work with museums, we've outlined a couple of creative ways that we've specifically worked with museums around the country during COVID-19 to help them address some of those pain points that I mentioned earlier. The first thing, and I heard this from a couple of people while we were discussing here in this meeting, was education content. How do I continue to serve education content effectively? And our kind of brainstorming around that led to the creation of digital field trips on Vamonde. So we've worked, actually, this is the Frontier Culture Museum in Virginia, but we worked with them to help them package up their museum content, activities, and lesson plans together into a virtual field trip that they're then sharing out with all of those stakeholder groups. What was nice about this virtual field trip was that it was able to mimic the in-person experience as much as possible. So they were adding video, text, images, hands-on activities to really bring together and encapsulate as much as possible what an actual experience traveling to that site and visiting that site would be like. I'll actually walk you guys through it later on in the presentation today, but what was great about it was really combining the multimedia aspect of it and then leveraging existing education content. So they weren't out there creating new content for a digital field trip, but really using the lesson plans that they'd done, notes from their tour guides on what worked well and didn't work well for a certain grade level, and packaging that all together into an easy to use, easy to navigate field trip that any student could go on in their own home or during a virtual class. Lastly, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it was really important for them to connect with all three of the major stakeholders. So educators can leverage the lesson plans and the activities within the digital field trip and incorporate that into their existing class work that they were planning to do. Parents and students, especially while they're sheltering in place, can freely access this content and also leverage it to do at-home activities or learning while school is closed or school is in transition to a e-learning or digital space. I think one of the major benefits of the digital education content that I've seen is really the use of multimedia leading to accessibility for multiple learning styles. So if you just have pictures and text in an e-learning format, that's not reaching people who learn best by video, who learn best by audio. So leveraging all of those multimedia and putting that all together has really helped the museums that we worked with connect with audiences that have different learning styles and different approaches, therefore improving learning outcomes that they would normally have expected from this field trip. Next up, we have online exhibitions or virtual tours. I heard from some of you that our space is closed. Many museums I spoke to said, we just don't want to have all this great material sit in our empty museum space. So they converted their existing exhibit into an online exhibit or virtual museum. This way, they were able to directly link this online exhibit tour to their website for more information while they were closed, or a donation page to help them through their current efforts. And I think what's great about this is that our major finding was that digital audiences are really seeking really interactive cultural content right now, especially since we're all either stuck at home or limited in where we can go. I think it's really important for museums such as the Design Museum here to really create content that's easily accessible, but also allows people to interact with different stories, different experiences than they would normally be doing at home, either in their own home, or they can actually visit the specific sites, as you can see in the map, sites that are listed that relate to that specific exhibit. We've also thought a little bit about the long term. What's going to happen when we slowly emerge out of the shelter in place, as we slowly open up all the businesses, museums that have been closed for so long? And one of the biggest changes that's going to happen is that travel and tourism in general is going to take a traditional travel and tourism, which is travel by air or rail, is going to take the longest to recover. What we're going to see right away bounce back is going to be road trips or staycations, where people are just taking local day trips or visiting areas around their region. So in order for people to safely venture out of their homes to experience art, history, culture, we encourage many museums to create staycation and road trip guides that feature their museum. So either regionally or as part of a guide to Utah, you can feature your museum as a place to stop along for a road trip, or share with your locals that your museum might be a great place to have spend part of a staycation. In this case, museums can actually directly link to their website for more information on their museum hours, or if there's a different schedule that you're running, or if you're doing something based on tickets or having an offer, you can share all of those as well, and really connect back to your goals of your museum coming out of this crisis. What are you really looking to leverage? And what are you really looking to recover when we re-emerge from our shelter in place? Lastly, and I think this speaks for many of the tours that I'm sharing on today's webinar, but really digital audiences can explore this in their own homes or outside by maintaining physically distanced walks, or doing a road trip and being in their car, so that this is content that can be accessed safely, and I think that's important to mention. Lastly, social media is going to be a really big component of your current strategy, and I think it can be leveraged for your future strategy as well. A couple of recommendations that we have for social media for cultural institutions is, one, to really leverage the existing content that you have. Several of the museums that we work with put together inventories, so they built a spreadsheet of, these are all the photo assets that I have, these are all the things that I've shared before, these are videos that I can share, these are digital tours that I built on Vamonde that I can share. And so they listed out all of their assets that they can use and leverage those in order to make their social media posts. And they've really been posting more and more frequently than they have in the past. So if you generally post about once a week to your audience, I would really think about how you can move to twice a week or 3 times a week to really connect more with audiences that are spending more time on these social media platforms in general. The other thing I would recommend is to leverage your existing platforms as much as possible. So if you're only on Facebook and Instagram, really use those 2 platforms equally, or find out different ways that you can leverage all of their features, because that's going to be really important for you. This is also a time to be creative. So find new platforms that you want to try out that you haven't, because of either a human resource constraint or you just haven't had the bandwidth or capacity to really invest your time and resources into starting up a new platform. This might be a good time to think about, okay, how can I try Twitter? Or how can I use LinkedIn as a way to connect with people? There's so many different ways and so many digital platforms out there that there's really no shortage of things that you can try. We found success with working with museums on Instagram and Facebook Live to do programs or hands-on activities that they can then share. Here in Illinois, actually, our history museums have been posting to different Facebook communities that relate to history. So there's an Illinois history fan or buff Facebook group that has over 40,000 people, and they were able to reach all those people and share their great content, pictures, videos, things like that. And you have a built-in audience right there that's interested in your content. Make sure to leverage communities like that in your social media posts. Lastly, think about different takeovers and campaigns. Can you have one of your docents, for example, take over your social media for a day and share their perspective, or a frequent visitor or a member of your board take over and share a couple of campaigns that relate to why they think the museum is important or how they want to share content. Lastly, this is an undercurrent throughout any social media engagement that you do, but really now is not the time to create beautifully created videos and Facebook posts and things like that. Use a real authentic voice throughout. Some of the best videos that I've seen have been filmed on an iPhone by a person just walking through a space, and those still tell a really powerful story. So make sure that you're using a real authentic voice when you're communicating your stories or telling your stories from a new perspective. I think figuring out ways to deviate from what you've done before is going to be beneficial to you, and also figuring out how you can experiment with different ideas like this is something that you have a lot of potential to improve your current social media reach and engagement than you previously had. All right, so I've shared different examples of strategies that we've worked on with other museums. Are there strategies that you've done that I haven't mentioned or you would like to talk a little bit about further? I want to turn it over to you, and I'd like 1 or 2 people to share their thoughts. Anybody?
I guess a better question maybe for this, oh, people are on mute again. I don't understand why. Let's see. You can't unmute yourself, Diana.
Uh-oh.
Okay. You should be.
Now it worked.
Okay, awesome.
I have to ask for permission. I was going to say, one thing we've been working on is one of our board members has a 360 camera So trying to take pictures throughout the museum so we can create those kind of walkthrough kind of virtual tours. It's been kind of a little lengthy process, but trying to figure that out as something to put online for our visitors and things. And then we've started kind of shifting some of our programs and making them like just little quick online activities. So we're starting to create those kind of videos and things as well.
Great. Those are two great examples for sure. Anybody else?
I can talk. Let's see. Okay, I am unmuted. So with our SUMA at Home initiative where I shared that link, we wanted to kind of put our ongoing family programs online and still offer those experiences for people. So Create Playdate is one that involves a story book and then an activity. So we just translated those to an online format. And then because we had to cancel all of our K-12 tours and all of the other public programs, we used that grant money to get materials and resources for what we called art kits. And so we assembled 5,000 of those and distributed those on Friday through the free lunches program. So we just worked with the school district and had any staff members that were comfortable being involved in that, and we wore masks and gloves and protected ourselves and others, but went out to the schools and distributed those and then pushed people to that website for coloring pages, images of our current exhibitions, things like that, so that people can still experience our museum during all of this.
That's wonderful. That's a really cool idea. Have you gotten a good response from that kind of work, that kind of launch and
I'm not sure exactly, like as far as Friday in the moment, got a lot of really great reactions from people that worked at the schools, from parents, even from kids. But we did, the link I shared is kind of a special way that we can do a short link through the university, and then we can track that specifically. So we'll kind of look back Friday, did we see a lot of traffic to that specific page, and maybe even over the weekend as people were opening up those art kits and using materials. And then we encourage people to use a hashtag and tag us in sharing their creations online.
Yeah, leveraging user-generated content is something that I didn't include on here, but something that many museums that we work with are doing that I think is a really great approach to take during this time, because people are really looking to share their kind of creations and thoughts and work as well. So leveraging that and using hashtags or campaigns is a great way to do that.
Yeah, and I think then we can kind of track how successful it was. And so we know that there's a lot of like museum at home and things like that, but we didn't want our hashtag to get lost with everything else going on in cultural organizations. So we did just plug in SUMA at Home for that. And yeah, so we'll see what happens. But so far it's been pretty exciting to just find ways to remain engaged with our community, but also still working toward our mission.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Emily or Jennifer, do you have anything to add? I'll take that as...
Sorry. No, I was going to let Emily Johnson speak up for us.
I was just turning my camera back on because I was trying to save the bandwidth for Kartik. So I had conversations with many of you ahead of time before this information session, and I'm hoping that Kartik is going through most of them. The one thing from my notes that I thought might be interesting to discuss, and I think, Bobby, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's see, this is my conversation with Teresa when we talked about how there's like a lack of a joint advertising effort that sort of streamlines things between your city or a rack card or Facebook or your website, and how to sort of compile all of those things into one place. I think for the purposes of many of you, and I'm kind of bummed that the state parks people aren't here to talk more about this, but using your sort of a Vamonde presence to sort of help streamline a bunch of those other things will be really interesting. And Bobby, for your Arts to Zion project, in addition to sort of the museum stuff too, I think it can be really interesting. That being said, I want to talk, well, nope, I don't want to get ahead of Kartik. So I'm going to hold my horses a little bit, but.
Okay, if there's one thing I can add, Emily, to your point, I think that, so a lot of museums definitely use our feature of links and adding direct links to connect all of those disparate pieces like you just talked about. So they'll link to their website, link to their Facebook, link to their Twitter, link to their Instagram. Mm-hmm. And so people are seeing all of their collective kind of like digital presence all together packaged up into this digital tour that includes not just those links, but also content about the museum, why it's important, some stories that they're sharing, so that it's more immersive and not just a kind of shootout of every link that they ever have and put together into a collective presence. It's really more, it connects the dots a little bit more and puts all those different pieces together into kind of a story of, here's the museum, here's our presence digitally that you may see, and here is why you should visit or why you should kind of take part in learning more about this museum and their and our like work and stories, etc. So I think there are several examples that you'll see of Vamonde museums doing that within their content as well.
And I think, Kartik, maybe something to think about, and again, bummed that the state parks people aren't here, but some of these museums in today's conversation and who will hopefully be joining us in the pilot, they're dealing with like extensive grounds components to their museums, many of them, some with archaeological features and sites that can be a tricky question of accessibility. So too much physical access can sometimes threaten the site because people will pick things up, take objects out of context, things like that. Not enough access to the site makes it feel sort of unsupervised, and people might be more likely to visit the site and not intend to treat it with respect from the get-go because it feels like it's not being stewarded. And so I think there are many opportunities for an application like this to address not only a sort of removed physical stewardship of a particular site, but to also feature in some way different features of a site as well as objects that came from the site, when you have to just be careful about who is visiting different places. And for some of our state parks too, some of those archaeological sites just are not accessible to the public. The public doesn't know where they are. They're, limited to professional care in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just something I've been thinking about as you've been talking.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Vamonde being founded as a placemaking tool really connects with what you're saying, Emily, of we wanted to have some sort of physical geographic presence that will work well in that context specifically. So with it being a placemaking tool, you can also use it as a way to connect to places that you want to steward and not want people to visit and kind of over tourist, I'll use the term, a certain site that you don't, but still want them to get the experience and the content from it. I think this could be a great medium in order to still communicate that message effectively. So I'm going to move on. I wanted to share examples, and I think some of what we discussed will come up in these examples of different ways that museums have used Vamonde to tell their stories. So there's since Vamonde is, as you probably saw, really a versatile tool, you can apply it to your museum in several different ways depending on how you want to structure your story. So the first example I'm going to share is Gunston Hall, which is a plantation site and inform people about their site, sharing the story of the people that lived there. So the major person that lived there was George Mason. He was a founding father, less sort of known than George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the other founding fathers who had estates in Virginia. So they really wanted to use Vamonde as a way to share this story about how George Mason is really important to American history, especially the history of the American Revolution. They also decided to connect this history with histories of the people that lived on the estate. So talking about the stories of the indentured people that lived there, of the women that lived there, and giving those multiple perspectives a chance to really shine through Vamonde was a way for them to tell the story of the site in a unique way, not just saying, this is artifact A, this is why it's important, this is artifact B, this is why it's important, but really focus on the people, their lived experiences, and how it relates to stuff that people can see within the plantation or the grounds as a whole. Lastly, and this goes for any Vamonde tour, you have the flexibility of going through parts of the tour or the whole thing. So if people were only interested in George Mason's story, they can review that, but not go into the other stories. Or people can go through the whole thing and really look at this site in a new perspective through all of those different lenses that they shared. You can also go the more traditional route, which is what the Taubman Museum did here. They're an art museum, and they just did a tour of all of their galleries. So they wanted to put together all of their exhibits, both temporary and permanent, and create a tour that people could go on to showcase all the different kinds of art that they had available. They really leveraged their digital collection to use photos to bring all those collections to life. And lastly, I think what makes Vamonde content stand out is connecting content like this back to larger themes, significance, and larger context as a whole. So they added information about the artist, about the works of art as they related to a movement and different art movements in general, so that people are learning about the Warhol paintings that are at the museum, but also how this connects to the larger modernism movement that was happening in the 1950s and 60s. So those types of connections help in an education formatting and also help people connect more with the stories that you're sharing. Lastly, and this may speak to some of the comments that you had, Emily, but the historic Burwell Morgan-Mill had a lot of visitors come through. They wanted to create a digital experience that showcased the different parts of their site so that they could specifically emphasize exhibits or events and talk a little bit more about the historic preservation of their site and what it took to really make sure that the mill was in the condition that they had kept it in and wanted to keep it in. So they shared all the events, activities, exhibits that would come through the mill as a way to kind of showcase the site in its entirety throughout the year. And speaking to that point of kind of connecting all those disparate pieces, like added links to their Facebook page, their website, any of their other social media, so that people could directly connect from this content to all of that social media, all those different sites that where they had surface content about their mill. So I wanted to leave the space specifically for questions that people had about digital content in general, why it's important, or the specific strategies that I shared earlier, or examples that I shared of people using Vamonde to create different types of digital tours.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Diana.
Does the, like, all the photos and things, is it like you, I guess it's more like technical, like do you just upload all the things, like it has all the template to build it and you just kind of plug in the things that you need to?
Yeah, so I'll walk through that in 2 minutes, but basically the process, and I'll talk about a little bit about the process here, but basically what I recommend for our museum partners is to collect all their content that they want to use. So gather all their pictures, put together all your text, figure out the structure of your story and what you want to share and how you want to share it. And then the input part of it is essentially a a little bit more advanced copy and paste. So you're going to be inputting it by selecting all the images that you put together, by copy and pasting all your text and putting it into a template. And then the technology will actually generate those tours that you will see on the website and on the app.
So Teresa has a question about, is there assistance for helping create digital tours, and is there a cost for this assistance?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kartik.
Okay, so basically we can help you build the tours by, if you send us the content, we'll package it up, have a writer work on the text and make it user-friendly, etc., and really create a tour. We'll create the tour for you. There is a fee for that. It doesn't come under the free version. The fee really depends on how long your story is and what type of content you're adding. So it's dependent on the length, on the media that you're sharing. That is all factored in. If you want, you are in the free version, you can create the content yourself. The creation of the content only takes about a couple hours once you have everything put together. So, and that's a liberal timeline that I'm giving. It's, like I mentioned to Diana, like the process is really simple in terms of transmitting the content that you've collected into the Vamonde software. And we do offer learning resources and tutorials, hands-on tutorials. If you want to go through how to create content, I will walk through it step by step with you as well.
So I just want to jump in here a little and say a little bit about what we had planned for the cohort of museums participating in this pilot, as you know, part of the invitation that I extended from the Office of Museum Services, and that is that it's our intention to assist in whatever way that makes sense in helping you guys get that content developed so that it can work inside the Vamonde platform, whether that's, and we've talked a lot about this, but it's a pilot, so there's a lot of possibilities sort of floating around right now. That might be things like helping you pay for a photographer to get into your site to get some of the stuff ready to go for Vamonde. For those of you who do need help, like with the writing portion, maybe that is us, you know, paying Vamonde to help you directly with what Kartik was just describing. We are, like we've sort of discussed, most of us on the phone, it is trying to create a really robust version of what our online digital directory and digital materials might look like. We hope to expand this later, and so if we can use this as a proof of concept for, you know, how easy was it for you all to use? You know, you do represent museums of different disciplines and of different sizes, different staffing models even. So how easy was it for you to do? What kind of realistic assistance is necessary in order to make this possible? And then, you know, what can be done with the product on the other end? Was it a tool that you guys were able to wield effectively in getting more folks through the door, if that's what you set out to do, so that eventually we can, the hope is to sort of partner with state tourism in the future to get on their website, which has a lot of traffic, to sort of put it lightly, and to use that as a place to really help state government double down on cultural heritage tourism opportunities. You know, as we all know, they've done a really great job at outdoor rec kind of stuff, but they have an interest in this, and so do we. So let's work together going forward. If, you know, you guys do think that a pilot like this is if this is the right project for you at the right time, we want to work with you very, very closely in developing what that looks like and how we can be of the most assistance. And it's meant to be a sort of two-way street. You guys are doing us a huge favor in offering up your museums and your experiences and your expertise in order to help us show what we can do. So anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm really excited that you're here. And I think there are, Teresa has a question in the chat. Is there a deadline on the pilot for it to be completed? Jennifer and I have made a couple of changes to our schedule in that we were going to have the in-person training for this done by the end of June. That is not going to happen at this point. So we're looking to the fall, to August or September, to convene our sort of half-day training. Nothing has been scheduled yet because that, frankly, may also be too soon. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can about it. I know that some of you, I think it was Diana and I who had a conversation about how some of this might be able to be done now, and then sort of rolled out in a longer scope of things. And I think that is possible. But Teresa, to your point, I'm sorry, we then budgeted for this project in the next fiscal year. So we're sort of rolling it out softly right now in April, May. And the money for it sort of begins July 1st of this year and rolls all the way into June of next year. So, but that being said, the externally driven deadlines for your digital content, I don't know that those are really going to be the things driving your project forward, if that makes sense. I think you're going to be working on your own timelines based on your own capacity. And what we love about Vamonde is that it can be really flexible. You don't all need to be doing the same things at the same time. Your end results are not going to look the same. You're hopefully can all build something that works best for you around your own capacity, staffing, and time.
Kartik, I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there like tutorials that we can link to the folks that are on this info session, like how to start your account and how to get, situated in Vamonde, how to do a post? Because it's actually, Emily and I have been walked through it, and it's actually really straightforward, really easy. And so I do think that there's an opportunity here to maybe have some of those that are online on this session and interested to maybe start their own account and to start filling it out, because you guys all have the content already. And so, I'd be curious to see what can be done remotely. And it might be that we do a training remotely. We haven't figured that out. We're still, like all of you guys, are still in flux and transition. So, I don't know, Kartik, if those are resources available.
Yeah, so we have a pretty robust self-training module with videos, articles that I can share that'll get you started in creating your account and then figuring out how it's structured. I'll show you guys what the tool looks like in just a second. But I can also do in-person tutorials. Sometimes people may find that more helpful, especially if they're working with the new technology. So Emily and Jennifer, what I can do is just send over a couple of times that work for me. If we can get a couple of people together in this group for those times, we can then do kind of joint information sessions around the digital tools specifically, so that we can get a good understanding of here's what these terms mean, and this is how you would you'd start creating your virtual tour and a section of your virtual tour, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, great. So, and we'll definitely follow up today's conversation with an email to all of you with some additional resources as well.
I wanted to read the question in the chat in case you hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I just saw it, so I can read that out.
Okay, great.
But so basically, our partnership with Utah State Museums allows you to have the free account. That's also the official account, so you don't need to worry about it transitioning to the official account in the future. The account that you set up will fall under the Utah kind of umbrella, and then we'll make note that you've already created your account so that all the benefits continue rolling even after we do the in-person session and kind of get this pilot rolling. in the next couple months. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did.
Awesome, thank you. Looks like what I'm gonna do is stop my share for a second, and then I actually put together a walkthrough of what a digital account looks like, so you can see it live. So basically, when you set up your account, this is what it'll look like. Obviously, there won't be all this content in there. This is the demo account that we usually use for training. But you'll see that not only can you create virtual tours, which are these little pictures that you see down here at the bottom and up here, but you can also add events to the platform. So that's something that may be of interest to you, especially if you're doing a lot of virtual programming right now, or are going to ramp up your in-person programming in a few months. But any of the content that you create, you'll see that it's structured basically. Hold on, it's not loading for me. There we go. So it's structured basically, you'll see the title of the tour up here, and then these are individual locations or sections that are part of your tour. I mentioned that it was glorified copy and paste. I'll show you a little bit about what the actual input of the content looks like. So basically, you have all these text boxes, links for pictures, video. Everything is really easy to input. All you need to do is click on the symbols and then just enter the information that you want to add for each of your specific sections. Once you're done, it'll auto-save, and then the publishing feature works both for web and mobile. A little bit about the other tools. So we do have engagement tools available, so you can share directly to Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn through the platform. You can also create a widget for your website, so add these tours to your website as well to gain views from the people that are visiting your website. Lastly, and I think this is a really important feature, is that we collate and share data on how your content is performing. So you can track lots of different types of information, like how people are viewing your content, either on web or mobile, how much time they're spending on it, how they're engaging with your links or videos, demographics. So you'll see down here at the bottom all the different demographics that are available. And then you can actually see a map of where around the state or around the country people are viewing your content from. So there's a lot of really cool data features available as well that are part of your package for the account that you'll have on the platform. In terms of how these tours look, actually, I pulled up one of the tours that we've done with the Swedish American Museum based here in Chicago. But this is how one of your web tours would look on our website. So basically, this is a exhibit tour of their permanent collection, but you can see kind of the welcome page. And they've added photos from their collection, text to talk about what this process was like that they're describing. And then they also added links in some of these posts back to their website or back to more information on any of their pages. This is also an audio tour. You can't see it here because it's not available on the computer, but if you open this on the mobile app, you can actually play the audio files for each step of this exhibit, which I think is a really cool feature to add for something like this as well. So we're almost out of time, so I wanted to turn it back to any last minute questions you may have. In terms of next steps, I'll be sharing out the recording, some of those links and resources that I talked about, and then some times based on my coordination with Emily and Jennifer on an information session where we can actually walk through the digital tools available, and you can kind of figure out how you would create your own digital content. And then we can take it from there. If you have any specific questions on strategy, or if you just want to talk a little bit more about what your museum is doing and how it can fit in with Vamonde, we can meet separately. I'll share my meeting invite link as well so that we can schedule a meeting with the rest of your team or just the two of us to talk a little bit more about what we covered today. Anything to add, Emily or Jennifer?
I'm just so glad you guys were all able to join us. And I know you all have specific needs and desires. I want to say that you've done so much research into, digital platforms and how we can possibly get your content pushed to the forefront because we are here to support you, and Vamonde has been so great to work with thus far, and really one of the best platforms that we've engaged with. And so we're really excited to move this project forward. For those of you, I believe all of you on here are part of our proposed cohort, but if you're not, either way, we still want to work with you, again, to tie it back to driving traffic to your organization. So more to come. Thank you for your patience and being flexible with us as we sort of navigate doing work in this new world. We really, really appreciate it. Yeah, and feel free to please send us questions. We can forward things along to Kartik and really anything you guys need, but we'll definitely be following up. Emily, do you have anything?
Ditto to all of that. And I'll probably have an email. As soon as we get those tutorials from Kartik, I will compose an email to the rest of the cohort. And I'm so glad that you're all here. It's great to see you all again.